Deep beneath Montana's frozen wilderness, they uncovered a lost Cold War aircraft, its tattered American flag fluttering weakly from a broken wing. But the true shock wasn't the plane. It was the haunting paw prints of mountain lions, silent guardians who preserved a forgotten history for over 60 years. Winter in Montana came suddenly, blanketing the small city of Bozeman in an immaculate shroud of fresh snow. The mountain air was piercing, each breath burning slightly with the chill, carrying a sharp scent of pine mixed with the faint, crisp promise of ice. It was early December, and the snow-capped peaks surrounding the valley loomed tall, like silent sentinels watching over the residents below. Even from within the warmth of Bozeman's cozy cafes and bustling shops, locals could feel the wilderness whispering its mysteries. Samuel Reed stood at the window of his modest office downtown, his rugged face illuminated faintly by the glow of a desktop monitor. He was 63, broad-shouldered with thick silver-gray hair that curled slightly at the ends, framing a face weathered by decades of outdoor expeditions. His ice-blue eyes held a perpetual sense of calm, tempered by the wisdom of experience. Samuel had dedicated his life to historical preservation and wilderness exploration, known among colleagues for his patience, precision, and quiet humility. Today, however, the habitual calmness in his expression had vanished, replaced by curiosity and anticipation. A gentle knock broke his concentration, and Grace Fletcher stepped through the doorway. Grace was 28, tall and slender, with fiery auburn hair cascading past her shoulders, usually loosely tied with a scarf to keep it from her eyes during expeditions. Her vivid green eyes sparkled with youthful curiosity behind thick-framed glasses, always observant, always searching for a hidden story. She moved with graceful ease, the kind of poise developed through years spent traversing rough terrain with a camera slung around her neck. Her grandfather's mysterious disappearance in these very mountains during the 1950s had deeply marked her life, cultivating a quiet intensity in her personality and driving her tireless quest for answers. Samuel, Grace spoke softly, stepping up beside him, her gaze drawn to the swirling snowflakes drifting past the window. The latest scans came in from the aerial drone team. They found something significant. Samuel turned, the corner of his mouth twitching upward in a slight, thoughtful smile. How significant? Cold War-era significant, Grace answered, passing him a tablet displaying the metallic readings. Her voice had an edge of excitement, carefully restrained beneath her professional exterior. Samuel studied the screen closely, his eyes narrowing at the distinct metallic anomaly marked prominently on the satellite imagery. Within hours, a convoy had formed on the outskirts of town. The expedition consisted of a dozen seasoned explorers, engineers, and historians, each chosen for their skill and resilience in harsh climates. Their vehicles, a collection of heavy-duty SUVs and specialized snowmobiles, stood lined up, engines rumbling against the frigid air. Grace carefully checked her gear before slipping into the passenger seat beside Samuel, fingers brushing reassuringly over the old leather-bound journal hidden in the inside pocket of her parka. Her grandfather's journal, a secret she carried close to her heart, hoping it might finally provide answers about his fate. The drive to the mountainous region was slow, hindered by worsening weather as heavy clouds gathered, swallowing the peaks above. The convoy crawled onward, following GPS coordinates until finally halting at a remote valley encircled by steep cliffs and dense evergreens, their branches heavy with snow. Samuel stepped out first, adjusting his thick, insulated gloves as he scanned the horizon. There, Grace pointed suddenly, excitement breaking through her usual composure. Through the fog and snow flurries, a metallic gleam caught the pale sunlight, sharp and unmistakable. Approaching carefully, the team soon made out the outline of a military aircraft, half buried beneath decades of accumulated snow and ice. The old paint was peeling, the emblem of the United States Air Force barely discernible beneath layers of frost and grime. Its tail was fractured but partially visible, with an American flag hanging tattered from the wing, rippling gently in the icy wind. Surrounding the wreckage were several military jeeps, their rusted frames and cracked windshields covered thickly by ice and snow, locked in a frozen tableau. Grace immediately lifted her camera, capturing the poignant scene, remnants of a lost era, frozen forever in time. Samuel knelt down, examining deep paw prints in the snow, their patterns fresh and deliberate. Mountain lions, he recognized immediately. Unusual here, their tracks leading around the aircraft, tracing intricate paths that seemed purposeful rather than random. "They've claimed this place," Samuel murmured, tracing the prints gently. "It's as though they're guarding it." As the expedition team methodically set up base camp nearby, Grace quietly explored alone. Pulling her grandfather's diary from her coat, she carefully flipped through the yellowed pages, her fingers trembling slightly. One faded entry caught her attention, a crude map sketched by hand. Her heart pounded as she realized its markings closely matched their current position. Her grandfather had been here, possibly on this very ground, decades ago. Her reverie broke at the sound of a soft rustle behind her. Turning sharply, Grace froze as her eyes met those of a large mountain lion perched atop a rocky outcrop, only yards away. The lion, massive and imposing, had thick tan fur dusted with snow, powerful muscles visible beneath its dense coat. Its golden eyes studied her intently, calm yet watchful. Grace felt a rush of fear mixed inexplicably with awe, holding her breath as the creature tilted its head slightly, as though considering something profound. Slowly, deliberately, the mountain lion turned away, vanishing silently into the snow-covered thicket. Grace exhaled shakily, glancing again at the pawprints circling the plane. "You're the guardian," she whispered softly, realizing this wasn't merely an expedition. It was the start of something profound. Later that night, with base camp fully established, the team huddled around a portable heater, discussing findings and plans for excavation. Samuel shared details with calm authority, his voice steady, outlining the significance of the discovery and the historical implications. Grace listened, her thoughts occasionally drifting to her encounter earlier, the lion's silent gaze haunting her memory. Outside, the snow fell relentlessly, wrapping their camp in an insulating quiet. Unseen, high above on a cliff, the mountain lion watched the tiny specks of human activity below, its breath forming small clouds of vapor in the frigid air. Its cubs, two young lions barely more than adolescents, pressed close for warmth, observing their mother's intense vigilance. She turned her golden eyes upon the cubs, silently communicating the sacred importance of the territory they protected, an inheritance passed through generations, forever intertwined with the fate of the aircraft and those lost within. Beneath the starlit night, the airplane's metal gleamed faintly under a fresh layer of frost, pawprints clearly marking the glass of the cockpit. A quiet message carved in ice and snow, waiting patiently through decades to finally be revealed. As dawn broke over the Montana mountains, a pale, muted glow struggled through thick clouds, bathing the valley in a ghostly twilight. Overnight snowfall had deepened the silence, muffling footsteps and absorbing even the subtlest whispers. Base camp was already awake, bustling quietly with preparations for deeper exploration into the enigmatic crash site. Samuel Reed stood near the center of camp, calmly instructing the team with measured gestures, his voice carrying clearly despite its gentle tone. His authoritative presence provided a reassuring anchor for the expedition, an experienced hand guiding them through the uncertainty ahead. Nearby, Grace Fletcher adjusted the settings on her camera, carefully wiping condensation from the lens. She glanced upward, eyes narrowing slightly as she considered the imposing slopes around them, blanketed in thick snow. It wasn't long before the crew began to feel the unnerving sensation of being observed. At first, it was subtle, a fleeting shadow, a rustle in the brush, but soon it became unmistakable. Samuel was the first to notice clearly, signaling to Grace quietly as he pointed towards the rocky cliffs overlooking their position. There, perched gracefully atop a jagged ledge, sat the mountain lion from Grace's earlier encounter. Its majestic figure was silhouetted against the pale morning sky, golden eyes reflecting sharp intelligence. Samuel murmured softly, "That's Ghost. I've encountered her before. She's an old one, cunning and cautious. Those two younger ones near her are likely her cubs." The cubs were smaller replicas of their mother, their bodies lean and agile, tawny fur tinged with darker stripes along their backs. They moved with a playful curiosity, though always under Ghost's vigilant gaze. Her powerful presence suggested wisdom born from years of survival in these harsh mountains. Samuel had long heard of Ghost from other trackers, stories of a mountain lion whose elusive presence felt almost mythical. Seeing her now, calmly observing them, sent a subtle shiver of respect down his spine. Grace instinctively raised her camera, capturing a striking image of the trio framed against the snowy peaks. Even through the lens, Grace felt Ghost's intense stare piercing directly into her, a strange sense of mutual understanding forming between them. As the sun climbed higher, Samuel led the team closer to the wreckage, instructing them to carefully excavate snow from around the fuselage and military vehicles. Grace worked quietly, yet her thoughts constantly returned to the journal tucked carefully inside her jacket. Determined to connect her grandfather's past to this site, she carefully examined every uncovered detail. Mid-morning brought an unexpected visitor. Ethan Brooks, a local historian summoned by Samuel, arrived via snowmobile. Ethan was 45, tall and lean with sharp features, close-cropped sandy hair, and eyes perpetually narrowed from years spent outdoors. Known locally for his thoroughness and keen analytical mind, Ethan radiated a quiet confidence tempered by humility. After greeting Samuel warmly, Ethan approached Grace, extending a gloved hand in greeting. "Ethan Brooks." He introduced himself with a relaxed smile. "Samuel mentioned your interest in the region's military history. Perhaps I can help shed some light on your grandfather's disappearance." Grace smiled gratefully, instantly comforted by Ethan's calm demeanor. Together, they carefully inspected the area around the aircraft, Grace explaining details she'd gleaned from the journal. As Ethan listened intently, Grace's voice grew more fervent. "My grandfather wrote about a hidden stash of supplies near this aircraft, marked by a specific emblem. If we find it, we might confirm definitively that he was here." Ethan nodded thoughtfully, his eyes scanning the terrain methodically. After several minutes, he halted, pointing at something protruding from beneath layers of compacted snow and ice. Kneeling carefully, Grace felt her pulse quicken as Ethan uncovered an ammunition crate bearing the faded emblem, described clearly in her grandfather's writings. A small eagle with outstretched wings. Her breath caught, eyes brightening with hope. This is it. He was really here. As the excitement of discovery rippled quietly through the team, Samuel stood apart, observing with an approving nod. His satisfaction, however, was tempered by the presence of Ghost, now closer, her cubs following carefully behind. Samuel noticed the distinctive pattern of pawprints she left, leading purposefully around the aircraft, marking specific routes clearly visible even through the layers of snow. Samuel knew this behavior was unusual, even exceptional, signaling something deeper at play. Throughout the day, Ghost maintained her quiet vigil. Grace and Ethan continued meticulously documenting their findings, photographing every recovered item. By late afternoon, Grace felt compelled to return to her grandfather's journal. Carefully shielding it from the falling snow, she reread the passage describing her grandfather's final known days. He had written about mysterious creatures observing his team, referencing explicitly mountain cats who guarded secrets older than man. "Do you believe in guardian spirits, Ethan?" Grace asked softly, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Ethan considered carefully before replying, eyes contemplative. "History here is layered in both fact and myth. I've learned to trust my instincts. And right now, my instincts say there's more here than mere survival." Samuel interrupted them gently, indicating that daylight was quickly fading. The team regrouped, securing their findings as twilight seeped steadily into the valley. The temperature plummeted sharply, driving everyone into their insulated tents, leaving only the hiss of propane heaters to break the oppressive silence. Later, alone in her tent, Grace held the journal tightly. Sleep refused to come, her mind racing through scenarios both hopeful and fearful. A faint rustling outside drew her attention sharply, pulling her from her restless contemplation. Peering cautiously through the tent flap, she caught her breath at the sight of Ghost standing mere feet away, eyes glinting sharply in the weak moonlight. Behind her, two pairs of glowing eyes belonged to her cubs, their breath misting in the freezing air. Ghost stepped closer, silent as a phantom. Grace remained perfectly still, heart hammering wildly. The mountain lion studied her intently, seemingly assessing the human before her. Finally, satisfied, Ghost turned away, her cubs following obediently as they disappeared again into the shadows, leaving Grace trembling slightly with awe and confusion. Returning to the warmth of her sleeping bag, Grace realized the journal had fallen open, revealing a page she'd never noticed before. It was a hastily scribbled note, hidden between glued pages, her grandfather's handwriting frantic and uneven. "They're watching us. Not hunting. Protecting. The cats know something we don't. Something ancient lives here, hidden beneath snow and ice. It's not just a crash site. This place is sacred, and they're the guardians." Grace exhaled sharply, the words reverberating through her thoughts. She had been right. Her grandfather was here, and he too had felt this strange, primal connection. Ghost wasn't merely watching them. She was guiding them, silently revealing secrets buried by time. Outside, unseen by human eyes, Ghost and her cubs settled once again on their rocky perch, watchful and unyielding. Beneath them, the plain's metallic form glowed faintly, illuminated by the cold moonlight. Their silent guardianship continued, echoing quietly through generations, a living bridge between past and present. Days passed steadily beneath the watchful shadows of the Montana mountains, each hour blurred into the next by endless layers of snow and ice. The expedition team worked meticulously under Samuel Reed's precise supervision, carefully excavating the Cold War-era aircraft from its icy grave. Samuel's commanding yet gentle guidance kept spirits high, even as the days grew colder and winds harsher. Grace Fletcher, driven by curiosity and a newfound sense of connection to the site, documented every detail with photographs and notes, often glancing at the distant cliffs where Ghost and her cubs maintained their silent vigil. On a particularly gray morning, sunlight weak and barely filtering through thick clouds, the team finally breached the cockpit. Samuel and Grace entered cautiously, stepping into an eerie tableau frozen in time. Frost-covered instruments glistened dimly under their flashlights, dials locked in position. Samuel brushed away ice to reveal worn leather seats, the pilot's seat belt still buckled, hanging limply as though its occupant had just vanished. Near the seat lay a leather-bound journal, partially concealed beneath fractured ice. Samuel carefully lifted the journal, ice fragments cracking gently as he freed it. "This must be the pilot's," he said quietly, examining the brittle pages. Grace leaned closer, her pulse quickening as Samuel handed her the diary. Her eyes scanned quickly, her breath catching as she read details of a clandestine mission, the handwriting precise yet hurried. The pilot described surveillance over Soviet operations, his words increasingly tense as the weather deteriorated during their fateful flight on January 15, 1958, a date never officially recorded in any known records. As Grace turned pages slowly, she discovered increasingly desperate entries describing how the aircraft was caught in a fierce, unnatural blizzard, instruments failing as the plane plunged into the mountains. Samuel's expression darkened as he understood the gravity of what they had found. "This flight was deliberately buried," Samuel murmured softly, shaking his head. "A Cold War casualty hidden from history." That evening, as the team rested in their tents, Grace sat quietly by a small portable heater, absorbed in the pilot's journal. She felt an odd, intimate connection with the writer, Captain Will Hammond. The journal described him as a man of disciplined calm, meticulous and professional, yet the entries also revealed vulnerability, warmth, and a longing for home. One entry particularly stood out, dated the night before their mission. Tomorrow we embark on a mission from which we may not return. My greatest regret is leaving behind those I love. If anything happens, let my son know I served honorably, and let him know his father was proud of him. Grace's heart raced, her thoughts flashing to her grandfather, whose name appeared only as Charlie within the pilot's pages. Could her grandfather have known Captain Hammond personally, perhaps even been part of his life beyond military duty? The potential connection consumed her, compelling Grace to dig deeper. The next morning, the arrival of a senior military official briefly interrupted their exploration. Colonel Henry Jacobs, in his mid-60s, arrived by helicopter accompanied by 2 aides. Jacobs was tall, his figure lean and erect, gray hair neatly trimmed beneath a standard military cap. His eyes were sharp, penetrating, giving the immediate impression of authority accustomed to obedience. Though outwardly polite, Jacob's demeanor was stiff, carrying an air of secrecy. Samuel greeted him respectfully, yet warily, sensing the colonel's reluctance to elaborate on why exactly he had come. "We received word of your discovery," Colonel Jacobs said crisply. "I'm here to ensure proper handling of sensitive information. We wouldn't want anything compromised." Grace felt uneasy under Jacob's cool gaze, instinctively clutching the pilot's journal closer. She subtly tucked it deeper into her parka, determined that Captain Hammond's story wouldn't vanish again under military bureaucracy. While Samuel diplomatically occupied Jacobs, Grace discreetly slipped away with Ethan Brooks, now a trusted ally. Ethan, calm and observant as ever, led her towards the rusted military jeeps buried nearby, hoping they might find additional clues linking Hammond's mission to her grandfather. Ethan's meticulous examination revealed something startling: a faded photograph wedged between seats of one vehicle. The image showed 2 young soldiers smiling warmly at the camera, uniforms pristine despite snowy surroundings. Flipping the photograph, Grace's breath caught at handwritten names: Will Hammond and Charlie Fletcher, January 1958. Grace's vision blurred momentarily as emotions surged. Her grandfather Charlie, unmistakable in his youth, tall, athletic, smiling warmly, identical to photos she'd grown up seeing. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, quietly supportive. "This confirms everything. They served together, Grace." "More than served," Grace whispered, suddenly understanding her own deep attachment to Hammond's journal. They were friends, maybe closer, brothers in arms. That evening, Colonel Jacobs departed, promising to return soon, clearly frustrated by lack of immediate cooperation from Samuel. Samuel, however, calmly reassured the team. "This is history long buried. Our responsibility is truth, not concealment." Later, Samuel approached Grace privately, noticing her contemplative silence. "You found something personal," he noted gently, understanding intuitively. Grace nodded slowly, sharing the photograph and revealing the journal entries to him. Samuel's eyes softened as he listened carefully. "Sometimes the past calls us back for a reason," he said quietly. "Perhaps your grandfather's story, like Captain Hammond's, needs telling now more than ever." As night fell again, Grace stepped out into the chill darkness, her breath steaming visibly. The sky above briefly cleared, revealing a startlingly clear spread of stars. Standing alone, she felt a deep yearning to understand, to reconnect fully with the grandfather she had never truly known, but whose life now felt intimately intertwined with her own. A soft crunching behind her alerted Grace. Turning slowly, she found herself face to face once more with Ghost. The mountain lion regarded her solemnly, golden eyes reflecting starlight. Ghost stepped deliberately forward, laying something softly in the snow: a tattered leather glove, military issue, worn from decades of weather. Grace knelt slowly, cautiously picking it up, recognizing faintly stamped initials inside. CF. Tears welled unexpectedly. "Thank you," Grace whispered hoarsely, barely audible through the knot in her throat. Ghost watched silently, the lioness's calm presence reassuring rather than frightening. Behind Ghost, her cubs remained quietly observant, their small faces curious yet respectful. Grace understood now more clearly than ever. These mountain lions weren't merely animals surviving harsh conditions. They were protectors of memory, guardians of souls lost in these mountains. Their quiet presence honored lives forgotten by history. Returning quietly to camp, Grace shared the glove's discovery with Samuel and Ethan, both deeply moved. Samuel, eyes solemn yet determined, announced firmly, "Tomorrow we continue carefully. History demands it." As they prepared for sleep, Grace felt the comforting weight of the pilot's journal close to her heart. Now accompanied by her grandfather's glove, a tangible bridge connecting her deeply to two lives long frozen in the ice, waiting patiently to be remembered. Outside, Ghost led her cubs back to the cliffside, pausing briefly to look once more towards the sleeping camp below. The mountain lion's golden eyes seemed wise, filled with understanding, silently promising continued guardianship over secrets she had watched for generations. The following morning brought clearer skies, allowing a pale sun to penetrate the misty veil of the Montana mountains. The cold persisted, biting deep, yet the newfound visibility raised spirits within the team. Samuel Reed stepped outside the main tent, breathing deeply the fresh mountain air, observing the campsite closely. Something unusual caught his eye, a small carcass, a snowshoe hare, laid neatly at the edge of camp. Samuel crouched down, examining it closely. It was fresh, deliberately placed, not the remains of a predator's interrupted meal. He glanced toward the cliffs, and, sure enough, Ghost was there, her noble figure outlined sharply against the morning sky, watching silently. Samuel's brow furrowed thoughtfully. Ghost's behavior was becoming clearer, revealing a protective intent that challenged everything he'd previously understood about these elusive creatures. More strikingly, fresh pawprints circled the camp methodically, creating defined routes through the snow, carefully skirting dangerous ice patches and hidden crevices. Samuel began to sense these paths weren't random. They were deliberate trails Ghost had created, guiding them safely. Grace Fletcher, meanwhile, had ventured out early, alone with her thoughts and camera, determined to investigate deeper around the wreckage site. Her grandfather's journal felt heavier now, imbued with newfound meaning. The faded handwriting no longer just distant words, but a poignant testament to a past heroism she had never imagined. Grace was lost in contemplation when she noticed something glinting faintly beneath the snow near the plane's shattered tail section. Kneeling down, she brushed snow aside carefully, her heart racing. Beneath layers of frost emerged a small silver pocket watch, its surface etched delicately with a familiar initial, CF. Grace's fingers trembled slightly as she held the watch, feeling its cold weight. She pressed the tiny clasp gently, and remarkably, the cover opened. The watch had stopped precisely at 11:17, the hands frozen forever in time. Nestled within was a small black and white photograph, barely larger than her thumb. A woman and a small child, unmistakably Grace's grandmother and father as a boy. Tears blurred her vision as she realized what this meant. Her grandfather Charlie had carried this watch until the very end, likely drawing strength from the family he left behind while desperately trying to save others on that ill-fated flight. Samuel found Grace silently weeping by the wreckage, watch clasped tightly. Kneeling beside her gently, he placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, waiting quietly until she composed herself enough to speak. He tried to save them, Grace whispered hoarsely, holding out the watch. This belonged to him. He stayed here to help the survivors. Samuel examined the watch respectfully, nodding solemnly. Your grandfather was a hero, Grace. Even if no one else knew it, He died honorably. That afternoon, a second arrival disrupted the solitude. Dr. Madeline Pierce, a wildlife biologist from the University of Montana. Madeline was a petite woman in her early 50s, dressed in practical outdoor gear. Her short, curly dark hair streaked subtly with gray. Her sharp, intelligent eyes observed everything keenly from behind wire-rimmed glasses. Despite her reserved demeanor, there was warmth in her voice and genuine curiosity in her expression. "I've studied mountain lions for decades," Madeline explained politely after Samuel introduced her to Grace. "But the behavior you're describing, active guardianship, is unprecedented. I'd like to document it firsthand." Samuel agreed readily, intrigued by the scientific insight she might offer. As they conversed, Ghost appeared again at the edge of camp, calmly observing the newcomer. Madeline regarded Ghost thoughtfully, immediately struck by her calm and composed presence. "Extraordinary," she murmured. "She's unusually calm. This lioness has made a conscious choice to tolerate, perhaps even protect, your team." Over the following days, Ghost's protective behavior grew clearer and more deliberate. She appeared each morning, leaving small kills as offerings, always placed near paths that steered clear of concealed dangers beneath the snow. Madeline meticulously documented everything, fascinated yet puzzled by this unprecedented interspecies interaction. Ghost's two cubs, following her lead, became cautiously visible too, their playful movements increasingly accepted by the team as part of their daily life. Meanwhile, Grace privately wrestled with the implications of her grandfather's sacrifice. Late one evening, unable to sleep, she sat alone outside, staring up at the stars. Samuel approached quietly, sensing her distress. "It wasn't just heroism," Grace confessed softly, voice thick with emotion. "My family always thought he simply disappeared, abandoned us. My father grew up believing his father was gone by choice." Samuel settled beside her gently. "Now you can tell your family the truth. Charlie Fletcher stayed because he chose to save lives. He stayed because it was right." Grace nodded, comforted by Samuel's steady presence. Her grandfather's pocket watch felt warm now, resting securely near her heart. 2 days later, another surprising development occurred. While mapping Ghost's carefully laid paths, Ethan Brooks discovered something remarkable beneath layers of ice near the aircraft, a small makeshift shelter, clearly constructed from aircraft debris. Inside, remnants of emergency supplies, blankets, and medical kits were scattered, evidence someone had valiantly attempted to protect survivors. Ethan gently retrieved a tarnished dog tag half hidden beneath debris, its inscription clear, "Captain William Hammond, USAF." Ethan shared this immediately with Grace and Samuel, their emotions evident. "Your grandfather tried to save Hammond too," Ethan concluded solemnly. "They must have survived here together for some time, struggling against impossible odds." This discovery solidified Grace's understanding, completing the narrative of heroism and camaraderie that had driven her grandfather. Charlie Fletcher had faced death courageously, refusing to abandon those entrusted to him, ultimately sacrificing everything he held dear. As the expedition prepared to rest for the evening, Madeline approached Grace quietly. "I believe Ghost has known about this shelter all along," she explained softly. "She's been guiding you, showing you exactly where to uncover these truths." Grace glanced toward the cliffs where Ghost and her cubs rested serenely under moonlight. "She's not just protecting the site," Grace whispered, awestruck. "She's protecting the memory of those who died here." Madeline smiled softly, deeply moved. "Yes, Ghost has become a living guardian of history itself." Beneath a sky filled with stars, Ghost lay quietly watching the camp, aware yet undisturbed by human activity. Her golden eyes reflected ancient knowledge, understanding far deeper than instinct alone. Beside her, the cubs slept peacefully, learning through silent observation their future responsibility as protectors. Ghost's presence reassured Grace profoundly, a silent affirmation of compassion that transcended species, uniting them all through sacrifice, memory, and the simple act of bearing witness. The days had begun to lengthen subtly, the distant promise of spring hinting softly through Montana's lingering winter. Snowstorms came less frequently now, though the cold remained relentless, its bite sharp enough to numb the senses. Each morning, Samuel Reed observed with quiet fascination how fresh, snow delicately blanketed Ghost's careful pathways around camp, only for the same intricate pawprint trails to appear again, faithfully renewed. Samuel, who had spent his life relying exclusively on facts and logic, felt increasingly captivated by the subtle wonder he could no longer dismiss as mere coincidence. Slowly but surely, his skepticism was thawing like ice beneath a warming sun. Grace Fletcher walked beside him, her red hair tied loosely beneath a thick woolen hat. Her eyes, always searching, now bore a gentle calm. Her grandfather's artifacts, a pocket watch, a faded photograph, and a worn leather glove, rested securely in her tent, deeply comforting her with their silent presence. Her mission had transformed from personal curiosity into reverent respect for the stories buried beneath these snowy slopes. Dr. Madeline Pierce continued her meticulous observations, now joined by one of her graduate students, Oliver Hayes. Oliver was in his late 20s, lean and wiry, with tousled blonde hair always sticking up from beneath his knitted cap. His earnest blue eyes shone brightly with enthusiasm for wildlife study, and his open, amiable personality easily drew others in. Oliver's arrival had briefly brought new energy to the camp. His boundless curiosity was infectious, particularly his fascination with Ghost's intricate behavior. One morning, Oliver approached Samuel and Grace excitedly, brandishing a thick folder of photographs. "You need to see this," he exclaimed, breath visible in the crisp air. Spreading the images carefully on a camp table, he pointed eagerly. "These paw prints from yesterday, they perfectly match trails I photographed from older ice layers. I compared them against earlier expeditions from this region. It's astonishing. Multiple generations of mountain lions have followed identical routes here for decades." Samuel's gaze softened in awe as he examined Oliver's detailed documentation. The implications struck him profoundly. Ghost and her lineage had actively maintained these pathways, deliberately preserving safe passageways around the crash site for over 60 years. The mountain lions weren't merely surviving. They were consciously safeguarding a place they had somehow recognized as important, sacred even. "This is incredible," Samuel admitted quietly, surprising himself with the genuine reverence in his voice. Grace watched Samuel thoughtfully, noticing this subtle but profound shift in him. The man who once dismissed stories of spiritual connections as foolish superstition now seemed humbled, quietly accepting mysteries beyond logic. Oliver nodded vigorously. "We've often underestimated animal intelligence, their emotional bonds, their capacity for memory and tradition. Ghost isn't just an animal. She's part of a living lineage entrusted with guarding this history." That afternoon, Grace and Oliver followed Ghost's pathways carefully, documenting each twist and turn with precision. Grace paused frequently, photographing not only the paw prints but also the surrounding scenery, the wreckage, and the stark, silent wilderness. Each step felt purposeful, connecting her deeply to both Ghost and her own ancestral legacy. Near one particularly large boulder, Grace noticed something faintly carved into its weathered surface. Kneeling closer, she brushed away snow gently, her pulse quickening. Etched shakily, as if by an unsteady hand, was a simple inscription: CF and WH, January 1958, brothers always. Grace stared silently, her throat tightening. Her grandfather, Charlie Fletcher, and Captain Will Hammond had etched this final memorial before fate overtook them completely. The simple words echoed profoundly through Grace's heart. They wanted to be remembered, she whispered, feeling a gentle sorrow tempered by pride. Oliver placed a reassuring hand softly on her shoulder. "And they have been, by Ghost, by her ancestors, and now by us." That evening, Samuel stood quietly apart from the group, watching the twilight deepen across the mountains. Ghost had returned, sitting regally at the edge of camp, her silhouette elegant and powerful. Samuel felt an unfamiliar impulse and, cautiously, approached her, stopping at a respectful distance. He addressed the lioness softly, his voice steady yet sincere. "I don't pretend to understand fully, Ghost," Samuel murmured gently, "but I know now there is wisdom here beyond human comprehension. Thank you for protecting this place, for keeping these memories alive." Ghost watched him silently, her eyes gleaming in the fading daylight, seeming to understand far more than any human could articulate. She tilted her head slightly, an almost human gesture of acknowledgement, before standing gracefully and retreating slowly toward her resting place on the rocky cliffside. Later, as darkness blanketed the valley, Samuel approached Grace privately, his expression thoughtful yet resolute. "You've given your grandfather and Captain Hammond justice," he told her softly. "Their bravery, their humanity, it's remembered now." Grace smiled faintly, gratitude and relief mingling gently within her heart. "And Ghost?" she asked softly. "She's part of that justice, too." Samuel nodded solemnly. "I never imagined I would say this, Grace, but I've come to believe some things can't be explained merely by facts. Ghost and her kind, they're guardians of something deeper, perhaps the soul of this land itself." Grace squeezed his hand warmly. Maybe they've always known something we're only just beginning to learn. At the same time, Madeline and Oliver recorded further observations. Oliver paused suddenly, noticing something remarkable. "Look," he whispered excitedly, pointing at fresh pawprints left by ghost cubs. "They're walking precisely in their mother's footsteps, not just following her, but exactly mirroring her every step." Madeline smiled knowingly. Generations of knowledge passed down directly through behavior. Nature's way of ensuring nothing essential ever truly disappears. At dawn, Ghost emerged once more, leading her cubs carefully along the well-trodden paths around camp, training them patiently. Samuel watched quietly, his respect deepening further, acknowledging the mountain lion not as a mere animal, but as a living storyteller passing ancient traditions forward. Grace stepped closer, speaking softly beside him. "They've been waiting decades for us to listen," she observed gently. Samuel nodded slowly. "And now we finally have." Together, they stood silently, witnessing the continuation of a timeless guardianship, understanding finally that memory lived not only in humans, but in the quiet dignity of Ghost and her lineage. Samuel's former skepticism had fully transformed, replaced by a profound, humble awareness of interconnectedness, a spiritual bond forged in the harsh beauty of Montana's frozen wilderness. The Montana mountains slowly began shedding their winter veil, the days growing longer and the sun climbing higher in the clear blue sky. Ice that had held secrets for decades gradually melted, uncovering a history once hidden beneath thick layers of snow. News of the remarkable discovery, the Cold War aeroplane, the forgotten heroes, and the extraordinary mountain lions guarding the site, had quickly captured public imagination. Soon, journalists, historians, and visitors from across the country arrived to pay respects and witness the sacred site firsthand. In early April, Samuel Reed oversaw the careful removal of the aircraft and the recovered remains of Captain William Hammond, Charlie Fletcher, and other crew members who had valiantly faced their tragic fate. The solemn procession, attended by local officials, military representatives, and surviving family members, was a moment of deep reverence. Standing respectfully in the cold spring air, Samuel watched with quiet dignity as the honor guard carefully carried the flag-draped caskets on a waiting military transport. He felt immense pride in having been part of uncovering a history long buried beneath Montana's ice. Beside him, Grace Fletcher stood silently, tears streaming quietly down her face as her grandfather's casket passed by. Her auburn hair shone brightly under the pale sunlight, gently stirred by a soft breeze, her expression a mixture of pride, sadness, and peace. Samuel gently squeezed her shoulder, offering silent support as she bravely faced the painful yet deeply meaningful closure. In the weeks following the ceremony, the story of the mountain lions quickly spread, captivating the world's attention. Ghost and her cubs became symbolic protectors, revered as living monuments to memory and compassion. Documentaries and news segments aired widely, featuring Samuel, Grace, Madeline Pierce, and Oliver Hayes, detailing the extraordinary role the mountain lions had played. Donations poured in to fund preservation efforts, and soon plans were underway to designate the crash site as a national memorial, protected permanently from disturbance. Grace, determined to ensure the story would never fade, began compiling photographs, her grandfather's journal entries, Captain Hammond's diary, and her own personal reflections into a manuscript. Days turned to weeks, and finally, her book, Guardians of Ice, was ready for publication. Its heartfelt narrative and compelling imagery captured public hearts immediately, becoming a bestseller and widely acclaimed for highlighting forgotten history and the powerful connection between humanity and nature. Shortly after, Samuel, who had grown deeply connected to the site, announced his intention to establish a permanent research station nearby. With the support of local government and university partners, construction began on a modest yet efficient facility, a simple wooden structure designed to blend harmoniously with the surrounding landscape. Samuel chose a dedicated small staff to assist him, including Madeline and Oliver, who enthusiastically accepted permanent positions. One new addition to Samuel's team was Rachel Davis, a local environmental educator in her late 30s, known for her quiet competence and passionate dedication. Rachel had long dark hair, usually tied back in a practical braid, eyes thoughtful and patient behind practical rimless glasses. Her calm presence balanced Oliver's energetic enthusiasm, bringing stability and structure to their research operations. Samuel particularly appreciated Rachel's ability to quietly manage tasks without fuss, ensuring smooth daily operations at the station. Rachel quickly developed a close friendship with Grace, often joining her to observe Ghost and the cubs from a respectful distance. Together, they carefully documented the mountain lions' continued vigilance around the memorial site. Rachel, deeply moved by the animals' intelligence and devotion, frequently spoke with reverent admiration about the quiet heroism Ghost embodied. As months passed, the research station thrived, providing crucial insights into mountain lion behavior. Samuel became increasingly convinced that their emotional intelligence and social bonds far exceeded scientific expectations. He published several scholarly papers, each meticulously detailed, yet infused subtly with a newfound reverence toward these remarkable creatures. Samuel had fully embraced his transformation from skeptic to advocate, often sharing quietly that Ghost had taught him humility, a lesson more profound than any textbook could convey. One cool evening in early autumn, Grace returned to the memorial to place fresh flowers beneath the engraved plaque that now adorned the boulder inscribed by Charlie Fletcher and Captain Hammond. Standing quietly, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. She had arrived seeking answers but found far more, a deeper understanding of family, sacrifice, and connection. Samuel approached quietly, joining her in respectful silence. Eventually, Grace spoke softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I never thought a mountain lion would lead me to my grandfather." Samuel smiled gently. Perhaps that's exactly what he would have wanted. He died protecting others. Now Ghost and her cubs honor that legacy. As twilight deepened, a familiar shape moved silently into view. Ghost emerged gracefully, her golden fur luminous in the fading sunlight. Behind her, now almost fully grown, were her cubs, sleek and strong. Rachel, Madeline, and Oliver joined Samuel and Grace quietly, watching reverently as Ghost confidently led her offspring along the carefully maintained paths circling the memorial. Their powerful paws pressed firmly into the ice, reinforcing trails worn by generations before. Grace took a deep, steadying breath, profoundly moved. "They're still guarding this place, just as my grandfather did." Samuel nodded solemnly. "And as long as we respect their guardianship, they'll continue their mission." Ghost paused briefly, glancing back toward the watching humans. Her eyes, deep pools of wisdom, seemed to convey an unspoken reassurance, an affirmation that this sacred trust, forged through decades of quiet vigilance, would never be forgotten. Turning once more, she guided her cubs purposefully along their ancestral paths, disappearing slowly into the gathering darkness. Samuel exhaled softly, his voice quietly reflective. We've learned something remarkable here. History is not simply a record in books or documents. It lives within nature, within the silent witness of creatures like ghosts. Grace nodded thoughtfully. They're the true historians, passing memory forward through living tradition. Nearby, Rachel adjusted her glasses gently, her voice barely above a whisper. They teach us that compassion is universal, crossing boundaries of species, connecting us all. Together, the small group lingered silently beneath the stars, deeply grateful to share in a legacy far greater than any one person. Ghost's quiet guardianship had united them, transformed them profoundly, and now forever connected them to this frozen sanctuary where history and compassion intertwined. As darkness fully embraced the valley, Grace knew she would always return here, drawn by powerful bonds of memory, family, and the gentle yet profound wisdom she had discovered. Standing there beneath the clear Montana sky, Grace felt certain that Charlie Fletcher's sacrifice and the silent guardianship of Ghost and her lineage would continue to inspire others, reminding future generations of courage, compassion, and the enduring power of remembrance. In the quiet beauty of the Montana wilderness, the story of Ghost and her mountain lion family reminds us of a simple yet profound truth. Compassion, courage, and connection exist everywhere around us, quietly guiding and protecting us even when we may not realize it. Just as Ghost guarded memories of those brave souls lost decades ago, each of us can also become guardians of kindness and compassion in our daily lives. Whether it's reaching out to help someone in need, listening patiently to a friend, or simply acknowledging the silent sacrifices of those around us, we all have the power to keep the spirit of empathy and understanding alive. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to share it with your loved ones. Leave a comment below and let us know how this powerful message resonated with you. Or simply type Amen as a gentle affirmation of compassion in your life. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us of our shared humanity. May God bless you and your family, and may you always feel protected and guided on your journey. Comment Amen below if you believe in the power of compassion and remembrance.